Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to the Marvel series for Randy Stradley's first Star Wars comic. Yes, I said Randy Stradley, and yes, I said Marvel, not Dark Horse. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. The story we're looking at this time is entitled The Alderaan Factor. It is issue number 86 of the original Marvel run. There we see a stormtrooper reaching down to grab Leia as she is falling, says, "Still feeling high and mighty, princess?" Now, we'll find this in a couple of places in the modern day. It's the third story you can find in issue number 6, the last issue of that Prestige format series classic Star Wars a long time ago. Of course, it also shows up in the regular trade paperback series, which was later sort of scaled down and reprinted to give us the omnibus editions. This is the first story in Star Wars Omnibus a long time ago, Volume 5, the last volume in this omnibus series. Now, honestly, what we have here is a story that is impactful, but not in the way you'd expect. The story itself isn't all that impactful. What we get here is a tale that's actually set before Return of the Jedi. And essentially, what we're dealing with is that Leia is on a diplomatic mission to Yincor with the Yincori. And on that mission, turns out there are Imperials there, because the Yincori wind up essentially turning on Leia, planning on handing her over to the Imperials under Wessel, only to wind up finding out that the Imperials have essentially double-crossed them, try to blow up the ship with the Yincori still on board just to kill Leia. Leia survives, only to wind up coming across a stormtrooper who happens to also be from Alderaan. And as they make their way with her as a prisoner and whatnot, every now and then sort of having to rely on each other, Leia is making the case for why he shouldn't be with the Empire because of Alderaan's destruction. He says, you know, Alderaan was never really a home to me. What did it ever give to me? The Empire's what gave me everything. So why should I care? Why should I leave the Empire? He actually carries a small rock, a small chunk of Alderaan on a chain around his neck. That's a very poignant thing for Leia to see. Eventually, though, he does bring her to the Imperials, only to wind up finding out that they don't want to question her. They just want to kill her on sight. When that's about to happen, Leia winds up being saved, as expected, by that stormtrooper, and then gets picked up by Luke and Lando. So they are out of there. There's not really a whole lot to this story. I mean, it's a chance to sort of see Leia in action. Nowadays, we're kind of used to the, you know, how dare you when it comes to besmirching the memory of Alderaan kind of stuff, and people who are from Alderaan and the memory of Alderaan and all that. But for the Marvel series, we didn't really see that a lot. It wasn't overplayed like it is all over the place in the modern EU, including especially in the RPGs and whatnot, especially the West End Games era of the RPG, where they seem to have people from Alderaan crawling out of the woodwork to give them a reason to go after the Empire and such. So in this case, kind of unusual, but still not something entirely inspired, I would say. It's a fun little story in the sense that, you know, it's poignant, but at the same time, you know, it doesn't really add much. You could take this out of the series and it would mean absolutely nothing to anything overall. It's another throwaway story, like Soul Searching was, like Sweetheart Contract is, but a decent little tale, even if it is somewhat predictable in the way that it winds up playing out. Whether that's the way it would have been predictable back then, possibly, but certainly the way it is somewhat predictable and formulaic in terms of the way we look at things now with characters like these. But maybe this was the blueprint for that type of story in Star Wars. It certainly is the prototype in the sense that it gives us a chance to see Randy Stradley in action as a writer of a Star Wars comic, long before he becomes the lead editor on the Star Wars comics, of course, for Dark Horse, writes under his name at times for Dark Horse, writes under the name Mick Harrison for Dark Horse, and writes under the name Wells Hartley for Dark Horse. A man of many, many, many names. I should add here, by the way, that Bob McLeod comes back doing breakdowns and Tom Palmer does the finished art here, just like in the case of the previous story, The Hero, albeit with Randy Stradley writing this time instead of Mary Jo Duffy. But a decent story, like I said, just, you know, these days it kind of feels like it's just kind of there amongst these. But an interesting way to start off this omnibus, given the fact that most of the stories in here are post-Return of the Jedi, only this story winds up being one set before Return of the Jedi that was released essentially out of chronological order in the way that they were published in these. Kind of makes me wonder if the reason why it's the first one in this edition is because it was Randy Stradley's first story, or if it was something that we were sort of not meant to realize as we were going through, just a surprising thing. We're going to find that not only does Randy Stradley wind up popping up in this last omnibus, so does Jan Duursema, the person who was the artist on Republic for so long and the co-creator and artist of Legacy and Dawn of the Jedi. So two big shot names in modern Star Wars comics get their names showing up in that omnibus for early contributions to Marvel. So, this story, Randy Stradley's first, The Alderaan Factor, is this an essential read? No. It's not. Like I said, it's essentially a throwaway story. You can take it out. It affects nothing. Decent little read if you're into the Leia character and seeing how they portrayed her and her reactions to Alderaan's destruction and those who are also from Alderaan in the early EU before it got so overplayed. That makes it worth maybe checking out, but it is not essential for modern or Marvel readers, unfortunately. This does, however, introduce Yinkor and the Yinkori, which are going to come back later on in other Stradley-based projects such as Crimson Empire. It'll also come back in Jedi Council Acts of War, an event which will spin off into other sources such as the Darth Plagueis novel. So it is laying the groundwork for a new species and a new planet that will come back. Just this story in and of itself, plot-wise, doesn't have big ramifications beyond itself in the EU. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.